So we're still in the middle of filming the brake system video right now, but we have an opportunity to get started on something else. The wiring harness. So this car came as a roller, had no wiring in the engine bay. I thought it was great that the parts car had a wiring harness, so I grabbed that and I brought it back home. It plugs in right here. Basically there's a plug on the firewall and this plugs in, and then there's a 10mm bolt in the middle. I had the brake booster pulled back, so that's why we're getting started on this, because I had plugged that in and I left the wires draped aside. And then I started to route the wires properly, like these are the wires that come up to the alternator, and I was getting everything all situated. And then I realized these wires on the engine harness are shot. If I bend this a little bit, it'll crack and break very easily. And then I noticed, even look at this right here. This has had no insulation on this wire, and this is a hot wire that goes to the alternator here, and that's right here along this valve cover. You see that? So this wire was shorting out to the valve cover and rubbing against it, shorting out for who knows how long when they had this engine and this wire harness in the 72 Camaro. Okay, so it's clear that this was arcing here. The wires are very brittle. It's not just this one. Look at all these little hairline cracks. See that? I got a couple in here. And the whole harness, when I was looking at it closer, is just shot. So I went and right here, I actually got this in the mail about 3 days ago. Got a brand new engine wiring harness from American Auto Wire. With this wiring harness from the American Auto Wire website, it was $190 before shipping. I was able to find it on another website for $161, and then I was able to get an additional $10 off for a military discount, and then I got free shipping. So we saved ourselves 40 bucks just by spending a little bit of time and shopping smart online. And by saving that extra 40 bucks, we were able to put that money towards a brand new sending unit for our gas tank, which is in the other video you guys have probably already seen by now. So even though we're in the middle of the brake project right now, we have the brake booster pulled apart off the firewall, giving us plenty of space to get down here to this plug. That's why I wanted to take advantage of this time and get it pulled off. So here is just a 10mm deep wall socket, works very well. All right, there we have it. So we got two parts to this harness. One part, this part here that has this giant C, is the engine harness side. And this section over here actually goes around to your headlights, your directionals, and your horn. So we're gonna, this guy should just pull out like that. Unplug this guy. Here I'm just separating the two harnesses. This is part of the wire harness that goes to the front headlights, I said. It also has wires that come off to the side that go to your windshield wiper motor that we don't have, because they gutted everything from this car prior to us getting it. So this is the original wire harness for the engine since the 1972. All these wires are just absolutely shot. Even down here, some of these starter wires right in there. I'm not sure if this is a fusible link or if this is just a protector from the exhaust, which you could actually see it melted there. And the insulation's been pulling back. Some of the copper wires in there, some of the strands in there are torn and they're falling apart. This is just a very unsafe harness, which is why we spent the money to get one brand new. Now the rest of the wires in the car, I've had the whole dashboard out. Those all look fine. The wires right here that go to all the headlights, they all look fine. It's just the wires that were sitting on top of the engine, probably due to so many heat cycles and cooling cycles that they just get brittle over time. So we spent the money just to replace that section of harness. Okay. So with the wire harness We're just gonna drape it over to the side here. I'm gonna send this underneath the brake booster. And here, these two should slide right together. There we go. You can tell the difference between the contacts, you know, brand new versus old. The instructions are telling us to apply it to the outside of the plug. So we just used the sealing compound here and very liberally applied it all around every single wire and every single hole. The idea here is to completely seal it off, so this way there's no way water or any other kind of fluids can get in there and corrode the wires or short out any connections. Now we can plug the other harness in and carefully reinstall. Being careful not to get any of this on our hands because the warning in the directions say it'll stain any surface. So here we got the plugs back together and we are just bolting it back in there for the final time, I hope. So we just got the wiring harness installed on the engine compartment. We got basically the starter hooked up down below and we got our MSD box hooked up kind of temporarily just to make sure I had everything correct. It started a couple minutes ago, so.
I was gonna record on my phone, but I didn't like that.
Why?
That hurt my ear, but I kind of want you to do it again so I could record it on Instagram.
If I do it again, you're gonna jump and scale scared?
Well, yeah, because I'll expect it this time.
Yeah, when I put my hand over here, it's gonna get louder.
Oh my god, okay. This is not good for my anxiety that I'm already having. Okay. Scary. People are gonna be pissed.
Well, my neighbors probably, since that's the second time starting in one night.
It's only 8 p.m.
Yeah, it's not late. But people are probably like, what the fuck? This is that social distancing.
Quarantine hobbies.
Everybody stay away.
Just it smells like a racetrack.
Yeah,
I kind of like it.
But that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Now I have to.
So the pop, was it exploding?
No, it's just a little bit of backfire. What it is the engine's cold. So when it's cold.
Were you scared?
No.
You didn't. I think I'm gonna look back to see if you flinched.
Okay, but yeah, when it's cold, it might pop a little bit like that when you're opening up the throttle. There's no choke hooked up to the carburetor right now, so that's all that was. Next thing is to put this the transmission in. The one that's in it is good, but it only takes about a tablespoon of water to ruin a transmission. So that one's probably toast. Might as well put the good one in that we have. And you can see that video right here. Moving on, so here we are going to look at the wiring on this Camaro. I took a day to really go through the wiring and organize everything nicely. As you can see, I've got my tools right here, just some pliers, wire cutters. This is a really cool tool right here. This is a wire stripper. Basically, you put the wire in, there's different sizes, and it clamps down on one side and then it strips the copper right off. Pretty trick. And then just some wire crimpers for our connections. And I've got my whole arsenal of little connectors and wire connectors and whatever. So right here, let's start off with this. Back down there is the plug. You got the plug right down in there. Comes out. I found on the factory diagram that you're supposed to have the wire come up over the brake booster, the harness. But when you drape it over the engine, it comes pretty easy because you have a T that comes right off. So obviously these wires come up the right side, and these go to some sensors. And you got another T right here that comes up over the passenger side that comes right up to your alternator. The one plug fits right in. On 70 to 73, the plug is red and brown. There's another plug right here that looks similar, but it's set further back, so you can't make the mistake of plugging that one in. Then you got your thick red wire right there that goes to the power output of your alternator. And then the harness continues downwards, and I actually used wire loom to individually wrap each wire because I was worried about it rubbing against this exhaust, and I was trying to provide any extra protection I can. But wires go right down there to your starter. I'll show a diagram. You got the main hot wire that goes to your battery, and then you have another hot that basically powers the rest of your car. And then you have your trigger wire, and then you have another wire. It's a yellow wire here. Now what happens is when you're cranking over the engine, the solenoid provides a 12 volt power to that yellow wire, and it comes up here, and it's supposed to go to the positive side of your coil. Now because I have an MSD box, the only wires going to the coil are out of this box. So what I did with those hot wires, since it's a switched hot and it also provides power while the engine is cranking, I use that to power the MSD box for the ignition switched hot that it needed. This is the piece that it was. It was the yellow one, goes to the starter and provides hot during engine cranking. And then this white with the design on it is your switched hot from your column. So these two are combined and went to this little connector that would go right onto your coil. I cut it off, and then I used a splice, and I spliced it right into the ignition hot that this box needed. And then out of this box, we have just a positive and a negative. I put wire loom. I didn't finish it yet, but basically I have a dedicated ground, goes right to my ground connector, and a dedicated hot that goes straight to the battery. And that's wire loomed up also. Right off here, we have this one harness right here that comes up to your coil. Pretty straightforward. We have this one. It's actually a little bit too short. It goes to your distributor. I was going to actually pull the distributor out, turn it about 180 degrees to give me more slack on these wires, but there's enough for it to work, but it could obviously pop off. There's a little bit of tension on there, so that'll have to get fixed. And then there's just these pink and blue wires. These are like trigger wires for like your rev limiter and whatever. I'm not using these, but I didn't want to leave it coiled up here, and I didn't want to cut them just in case I ever need them in the future. So what I did was I drilled a hole in the firewall. I used a rubber grommet, and I fed these wires into the cabin of the Camaro. So this way I have them in case I ever need them in the future. And that's what it looks like right now. It's pretty clean. I just have to clean up this wire. Oh, and one last thing. That switched ignition hot that I needed is in this wire harness, and I fed it into the T. I took the T apart and I fed it in through the corner, and it comes up, and then I spliced it right in to that yellow and white wire. And I have it tucked in there nice and neat. In order to try to keep these starter wires away from the headers, I have it pushed up against the block to as much as possible. And then I have it coming up, and right where it connects into the bigger loom, I had zip tied it to the transmission dipstick tube since this thing doesn't move. And I'm hoping that that keeps enough space. Right now I could fit my hand in between and it seems to work well, but I'll have to check it periodically, you know, throughout different periods of driving it, just to double check that none of these wires are going to get melted on these headers. And then the last part of this wire harness is this. What is this nonsense? Basically, all these hot wires that are in the car, like there's a hot wire that goes to the starter that comes all the way up to here. And then there's a hot wire that goes, the hot wire output from the alternator comes up to here. And then a couple others. Basically, all of these wires have to be connected together to feed your fuse box and feed every other circuit in your car. It all gets fed through here. And the interesting design is they have it bolted onto a stud here at the horn relay. So obviously that's your relay for the horn, and this I have to mount it to the firewall. But that's that. I'm sure there's better ways to do this to make it look neater, but this is the way the factory did it, so it's the way I'm gonna leave it. I will get a new horn relay eventually. They're like 50 bucks. I don't even know if this one works or not because I don't have a horn hooked up to test it with, but the whole system works. As you saw, we had the engine running, so this is good. I just gotta find a way to mount it. And the wiring harness overall is done. Just a couple wires for sensors and stuff, but the essentials that we need, which is the starter, it works off of the key, the alternator, charging system, and the ignition system all work. So that was our big accomplishments. We can work on getting things like the gauges working in the future. So that's it with the engine wiring harness. Not much of an exciting video except for the fact that we got it running. Super happy about that. At the very end of the video, after the credits, I will post a really good wiring diagram that worked for me, specifically for 1973 with a V8, and it was color-coded perfect with the wire harness that I got from American Auto Wire. I will have the link to that wire harness in the description below, and yeah, feel free to go to the end and look at those diagrams and pause the video. I must have used about 3 or 4 different wiring diagrams and none of them were color correct except for this one. So hope this helps somebody out. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm sure there might be a couple things that I missed, but yep. See you guys in the next one.